Jean-Luc. Sometimes I think the only reason I come here is to listen to these wonderful speeches of yours.
Hello and welcome to Enchantment of Eternity's Top 10 Best Picard Speeches. This video is a Patreon requested video, requested by patron Cardinal Doomsday, who requested that I do a video of my top 10 favorite speeches from Captain Jean-Luc Picard from Star Trek The Next Generation. So, you might as well go ahead and start and get into this. So I will say, unfortunately, I will not be able to show any clips of Picard speeches because I'm a bit afraid of being struck down by the wrath of CBS that has a habit of striking down videos and use any clips from Star Trek. So unfortunately, you'll just have to get... I'm not going to recite the entire Picard speech, but I will recite the portion of it, and I'll try my best to do my Picard impersonation. It's funny because I think about a year ago, I went to a movie-themed quiz night in town, and they had a section at the end of the quiz night where they had an actor get up on stage and recite something from like a movie or TV show, and they started doing one of these Picard speeches, and I was like, and so I was like, ooh, I know this, what is it? Oh my god, it's Picard. I was actually surprised that they'd be reciting a Picard speech, because most of the quiz night was about, like, you know, films, like, you know, British shows or whatever, but that was really interesting. I think I can do a better job than them. Anyway, let me start with my number 10 favorite Picard speech. And also, before I start, I should say that this is all for the speeches themselves, not necessarily the episode. There's some episodes in here that honestly aren't that good, but if they feature a good Picard speech, that's all I'm concerned about. So Picard has the best speeches, as Q said himself. So it's no doubt that I mean, this is a signature of The Next Generation as well. I mean, this is something none of the other Star Trek shows really had, is Picard was able to spin and moralize and just teach people, show them the way, or at least illustrate to everyone else that these people were no good. And Picard was so great at it. Anyway, let me get into my number 10 favorite Picard speech. And that is, Picard confronts the Edo on violating the Prime Directive from Justice. The question of justice has concerned me greatly of late, and I say to anyone, any creature who might be listening, there can be no justice as long as laws are absolute. Now, so Justice is not that good of an episode, although I don't hate it as much as some do. Some say it's one of the worst of the show. I think it's okay, and part of the reason why I think it's okay, because of this speech, to be frankly honest. This is a good speech, and what Picard says here in particular was absolutely true. It's amazing, and I'll sort of get into this more. This is a theme throughout Picard. He's saying that you can't stick rigidly to laws. They're not absolute. I love that. Anyway, get into my number 9 favorite Picard speech. And that is, Picard confronts Ambassador Alkar from Man of the People. Do you think that makes you appear courageous? Because you're mistaken. You're a coward, Alkar. You exploit the innocent because you're unwilling to shoulder the burden of unpleasant emotions. Okay, so Man of the People is a horrible episode. No question. I almost didn't include the speech because of that fact, but it's a good speech. And Picard is absolutely right to put this asshole in his place, he thinks. And you know, the context of this scene is like he's saying, oh, I'm so great because I'm making peace between these two worlds. You're going to say I'm bad for, you know, making Counselor Troy die and stealing all of her energy so I can be a good guy. But tell that to the people whose children's I'm saving. See if they matter. Yeah, and Picard's just like, well, you think that makes you moral? You think that makes you courageous? Fuck you, you're a coward, and I'm going to stop you. And although he doesn't stop him in that one scene, he does stop him eventually, so Picard's the man. Anyway, we'll get into my number 8 favorite Picard speech, and that is, Picard tries to get a time traveler to reveal the future from A Matter of Time. Every choice we make allows us to manipulate the future. Do I invite Adrienne or Suzanne to the spring dance? Do I take my holiday on Corsica or Riza? A person's life, their future, hinges on each of 1,000 choices. Living is making choices. So, I love this speech. And he does more of the speech where I wasn't going to quote the whole thing, but he has another part of that speech where he goes, I sometimes, choose to do it because it's the right thing to do. And I almost didn't put this in there because this kind of speech is kind of misguided because he's trying to get this time traveler to tell him what happens in the future, but really you find out that he's not actually from the future, he's from the past. But I do get the impression that, you totally get the impression that he wanted to tell Picard, but he couldn't because he doesn't know what Picard wants to know. And so I think if he did know it, he would have told Picard. He would have, Temporal Prime Directive or no, he would be like, all right, I give in. Your speeches are so amazing. They convinced me. Anyway, let's get into number 7, which is Picard dresses down Wesley for lying the first duty. The first duty of every Starfleet officer is to the truth. Whether it's scientific truth, or historical truth, or personal truth, it is the guiding principle on which Starfleet is based. And if you can't find it within yourself to stand up and tell the truth about what happened, then you don't deserve to wear that uniform. What can I say? I like Picard dressing down Wesley. And I actually like the fact that this episode made Wesley a dynamic character. He was no longer the Mary Sue that always saved the day. He was he was confronted with a true moral dilemma: betray his friends or betray his captain. And I love how eventually he did decide with Picard, even though it wouldn't mean alienating everyone who, all of his friends and everyone who knows him at the Academy. Great moment. Anyway, get into my number 6 favorite Picard speech, and that is Picard confronts his torturer from Chain of Command. Whenever I look at you now, I won't see a powerful Cardassian warrior. I'll see a 6-year-old boy who is powerless to protect himself. Despite all you've done to me, I find you a pitiable man. Now, of course, there's a lot of his interactions with Gul Madrid are amazing in this episode. And some people might say, well, this isn't necessarily a speech. I think it is a speech. I will counter that. And I just love how this is after Picard's been tortured. He's writhing around in pain. He knows by saying this will bring more torture, more pain. And the fact that he calls him, he pretty much insults him by saying, I pity you. It really speaks volumes of Picard's character. Anyway, so let us get into number 5. Picard confronts Worf about the witch hunts going on board their ship, the Drumhead. The road from legitimate suspicion to rampant paranoia is much shorter than you think. Now, again, you could say this isn't a speech so much as it's like a dialogue. It's dialogue, it's him talking to Worf, and there's some back and forth between him. But I do think, I count it as a speech, and I think that statement that he just said is amazing. I mean, this episode is amazing, and I'll touch on it more a bit later on. Anyway, let's get into my number 4 favorite Picard speech, and that is Picard argues with Q, sentenced to execute Amanda Rogers from True Q. Your arrogant pretense at being the moral guardians of the universe strikes me as being hollow, Q. I see no evidence that you're guided by a superior moral code, or any code whatsoever. You may be nearly omniscient, and I don't deny that your parlor tricks are very impressive, but morally, I don't see it. I don't acknowledge it, Q. So this is the episode where Q himself says, Jean-Luc, the only reason I come here is to hear these wonderful speeches of yours. And this one was really good, and I really get a kick out of quoting this one. But anyway, let's move on to my number 3 favorite Picard quote. Picard stands up for Data's sentience, measure of the man. decision you reach here today will determine how we regard this creation of our genius. It will reveal what kind of people we are, what he is destined to be. It will reach far beyond this courtroom and this one android. It could significantly redefine the boundaries of personal liberties and freedoms, expanding them for some, savagely curtailing them for others. This whole episode was amazing, and particularly this end sequence where he puts Commander Maddox, whatever, on the stand, was filled with great Picard speeches. This one in particular is one little thing I took out because that stands out to me, that he sees the consequences. He sees the ever-reaching consequences of this one trial. And it's not just about Data. It's not just about this one android. It's about taking the rights away. And there's so many ways that this reflects our current modern-day society, where people try to say this issue is not about rights or whatever, when really it is. And I love how Picard sort of states it out, like, no, you will be savagely curtailing the rights for many across the galaxy, and I love that. Anyway, let me get into my number 2, my second favorite Picard speech, and that is Picard speaks out against the witch hunt from the Drumhead. With the first link, the change is forged, the first speech censored, the first thought forbidden, the first freedom denied, chains us all irrecoverably. I pronounced that wrong. Anyway, that's the speech that they said at the quiz night. I think they might have done a better job than I just did. But again, this whole scene at the end of the Drumhead was absolutely amazing, where Admiral Satie thinks that she's going to, she thinks she's going to humiliate Picard, she thinks she's going to ruin his career, but Picard ends up turning the tables on her. He ends up getting this Admiral to shut down Satie's witch hunt for good. And how does he do that? With a great speech. and that's just a portion of the speech where he just... And in fact, that quote's not really actually from him. He's quoting Satie's father, which again is a really backhanded way of getting at her, because it pisses her off and gets her to show her true colors. But what's in the speech, even though he's quoting someone else, is still amazing. It's a good commentary in the entire episode, and it has a lot of reaching, it's probably based off the communist witch hunts of the 50s to 60s, the whole McCarthyism and all that sort of thing, but it was very relevant in the decade after this episode aired. It's kind of scary how it continues to be relevant, and how people were willing to give up their freedoms and take the freedoms away from others just for some false sense of security. And so this speech, a lot of people need to listen to it, not just Star Trek fans. It has very bold implications. Anyway, let me get into my number 1 favorite Picard speech, Star Trek Next Generation, and that is Picard stands up for Data's right as a parent from The Offspring. There are times, sir, when men of good conscience cannot blindly follow orders. You acknowledge their sentience, but you ignore their personal liberties and freedom. Order a man to hand his child over to the state, not while I'm his captain. That was amazing. That's part of the reason why I love this episode so much. That speech in particular. And I love how Data was just perfectly willing when the Admiral is like, bring Law and bring her to my ship so I can take her to a facility. He's like, okay. And he gets up and Picard's like, no, I'm not going to let you do it. Which I love, because it's different. Some might wonder or might question me putting this speech above his Measure the Man speech, because Measure the Man is also an amazing episode. It's also an amazing speech. But the reason why I kind of hold this in higher esteem is because in the Measure of Man, Data was fighting back. He was asking Picard to defend him and his rights, where here Data wasn't really asking for it. He was willing to just give up and do what the Admiral says, but Picard is the one who sort of talked him into it. He's like, hold your ground, Mr. Data. And then Data went with him because he saw that Picard was standing up for him, standing up for his rights, and to acknowledge his sentience, like what was established in Measure of the Man, wasn't good enough. You have to respect his rights. Beautiful episode. Beautiful moment. great Picard speech. Anyway, that is it for my top 10 Picard speeches. This was a Patreon requested video. If you want to help support the channel on Patreon, you can follow the link below to become a patron. If you donate $1 or more, you get access to my Patreon only series of videos. At the moment, I'm doing the top 10 most overrated movies, and I'm moving on to my top 10 most underrated movies. You also have early access to one video a month, where I will release it to my patrons only about 2 or 3 weeks before I release it to the public. Also, I will send out my schedule, so you see all the videos I plan on making in the coming months. And if you donate $10 or more, you can request a video for me to do like this one, and I will do it as soon as I can. So if you want to help support the channel, be sure to click the link below. But if you just want to help support the channel by leaving a like and subscribing to the channel, that is very much appreciated as well. So be sure to keep an eye on my channel as I cover many more Star Trek shows, and I cover many other videos, many other shows like Game of Thrones, The Expanse, Lost, and more. So be sure to subscribe so you can keep up with all of that. Thanks a lot for watching.